Okay. Yoga. At the first workshop I didn't, but at the second workshop I did. I asked how many yogas are there. Some people think there are 20 or 30 or many different kinds. On the surface it looks like there are, but what happened is that we extracted some element from the whole science of yoga and gave it a name, a label. But yoga in itself is one science. There is only one yoga. It's the science of life. For many people, especially now that yoga has become so popularized and commercialized, for many people yoga exists out of exercise. And there's nothing wrong with that. Exercise is good, is healthy for everybody. But going further into real yoga, traditional yoga, you realize that there's a totally different dimension to it that goes far beyond just physical exercise. And that is also where yoga becomes truly transformative. It allows people to really change in very profound ways. That we will come back to that later, how that works and how it also changes people. But yoga exists out of 8 limbs, of which exercise is only one. During both workshops, we clearly explained that the exercise also is very particular and in most yoga classes not done in accordance with that. Asana, however, yoga exercise, is the third step in yoga, the third limb. Yoga starts with Yama. Yama are moral principles. And if you do not understand what this is about, you think that this is about being superior to other people or having the moral high ground or something like that. But that is, of course, superficial thinking. What Yama really is, again, about sattva. As human beings, for a large part, we function subconsciously. And this means that as a result of the outside world, circumstances that we find ourselves in, we will simply function in a reactive way. So if the circumstance is aggressive, we will act or react in an aggressive way. If the circumstance is very mellow, we will become mellow and act in a mellow way. That is instinct. It is very natural, of course, but there are many instances where we act in an instinctive way, in a reactive way, where we find ourselves ending up in trouble. Conflict occurs, or we make mistakes, simply that we later regret, but we can't turn back the clock. By learning about this subconscious functioning and the instinctive reactions that we normally have, by being aware of that, you can actually reduce these reactions. As a result, you can reduce the disharmony that is caused every time when we react. You can call it a knee-jerk reaction or in reactive ways. If you go along with circumstances that you find yourself in. So what this is doing, it allows you to become the boss. It allows you to take charge in situations rather than be subjected to it. And you can actually make the mood. If the mood is not good, you can transform it into something positive. The very first principle that you learn in yoga is Ahimsa. Ahimsa is what Gandhi is famous for, the practice of non-violence, non-violent resistance to the occupiers. Also Martin Luther King preached non-violence. Because violence begets violence. If you resist through violence, you can expect violence to come back to you. And it often becomes a vicious cycle to which only huge disasters bring an end. Yoga is a science to become more and more harmonious, to allow yourself to function on higher levels of consciousness. But how can you remain at higher levels of consciousness if you every time react upon the things that happen around you, when people are rude, unfriendly, or outright aggressive? Every time you lose your peace. It is the very reason why monasteries and temples were built, often far away from settlements, from places where people live, to reduce any possible distraction from people that have no good intentions with you. We live in a big city, 10 million people, and it is unavoidable. There is lots of disturbed energy around us everywhere we go. So it is a good learning ground to put ourselves to the test and to try to first distinguish when we feel aggression. Anger is also aggression. Emotions and emotional reactions is aggression. And to then, because you are aware of what is happening, to then decide not to go along with it. To decide not to give into it. And you will see as a result, you avoid conflictuous situations, which you can find anywhere, in the bus, in the subway, in the shop where you go. You can avoid those, and as a result, stay much more in peace, in sattva. Preserve your most precious asset, which is energy. And the reason why it is important that it is at the foundation of yoga, the first subject, is because we are so used to the disharmonious world around us and our place in it, that we do not even consider it, that we do not even realize what is happening and how disturbing it can be. Once you become aware of it, you start recognizing it, and that gives you the power to avoid it. Not always, nothing is perfect. You play with it. You play especially with your ability. It's very important also that you do not try to be perfect in this, because there is no perfection. And it is very important to avoid pursuing perfection, to understand that every time you make a mistake, it is an opportunity to learn. So that is not a negative, it is a positive. So we have to totally change our point of view to how we think and feel about making mistakes. Many people cringe and want to hit themselves over the head when making a mistake. No, mistakes are opportunities to learn and to grow. So when you make a mistake, you just smile at your imperfection and you try again next time. And that is how you gradually become better and better at it. That is what real mastership means. Mastership is not perfection, but gradually getting better and better at something. And here you're getting better and better at understanding your subconscious functioning, how it is manipulating you, and how you can actually transform that into something positive. At the workshop I explained asana as standing still. Asana literally means standing still. And if you find it difficult to apply non-violence in your daily life already, because it seems a little bit complicated and you have to get used to the new concept of looking at yourself and the world around you, start applying non-violence first in your yoga practice. Violence is recognized when you experience pain. So when you do an exercise, many yoga classes, the teacher actually comes to you and pushes. Yeah, you must go a little bit deeper and a little bit stronger and stay a little bit longer. And no, that is actually all forms of violence, violating the very first principle of yoga, Ahimsa. Ahimsa means becoming your own best friend at first. And when you do asana, you listen carefully, you're standing still, which is only possible by focusing. And in that experience, you simply you observe how you feel. And there are guidelines that say you have to stay in a pose for so long, and the alignment should be like this. But these are only guidelines. The only judge of how you do the pose and how long you stay is you, and you base that on what you feel. If not, and this is what we usually do in the gym and also often in yoga, we look at the clock and we say, I have to stay in this pose for 1 minute. But after 30 seconds you start to shake, you start to sweat, you feel pain in your muscles. There is no harmony anymore. All these symptoms are indicating that the harmony is actually being disturbed, and the purpose of asana is to install harmony on physical level in the first place. So staying longer in a pose or pushing yourself farther than you reasonably can is overshooting the goal. And the goal is sattva, not physical prowess, not perfect pose. So this is your first step also in learning to follow your heart. Not your head, but your heart. You start by observing how you feel when you do asana, and you will integrate that in daily life situations. But it starts with your yoga practice. There are 3 levels of violence. Physical violence is the most obvious. Everybody will recognize that. When you punch somebody. Verbal violence, most people recognize that too. But we consider it to be less serious than physical violence. But there's also mental violence. And that is one that goes unrecognized everywhere. But they all result in the same. They result in disruption. When people have negative thoughts, violent thoughts, even though they don't pronounce them, you actually feel that. The opposite is also true. When people are filled with love and they act in very loving ways, you immediately feel that. It directly affects you. So it is important that we learn to guard not only our physical actions, our verbal actions, but also our thoughts. Because one person with negative thoughts, you can see this if you observe families. If there is a person in a family that is persistently negative and kind of aggressive, without expressing it, the rest of the family is tense. And the opposite is also true. If at least one person in a group of people in a family is filled with love and acts with love without speaking or physical actions, the whole family is much more harmonious. It affects everybody. Now, as yogis, it becomes more and more important that you realize it is your responsibility. Other people's well-being becomes part of your responsibility because you know that you have that influence. And of course, you can't always help it. Sometimes you are a bit grumpy or you are not in a good mood. But when you realize that, and you realize that it affects other people, you will try to turn it around. You will try to transform that into, maybe you make a light-hearted joke or something, just to change the atmosphere for yourself and then the people that you have affected with your grumpy mood. Haste is a form of violence. You know, I've been doing yoga forever. It started 40 years ago. And I always have the habit, if I have an appointment, to leave home early and to arrive early. Just because I'm following my feeling. It's not because somebody told me or because it's supposed to be the right thing to do, but this is what happens. If I leave home late, I realize I'm going to be late at my appointment. So what do? I rush. Bang! My harmony immediately crashes. My peace of mind crashes. Instead, I do the opposite. I leave earlier. I arrive earlier, and that gives me a little time to acclimatize. It gives me a little time to look around in the building where I have my appointment. Just look around the environment a little bit, inside, outside, just so that you are completely at ease when you are there with your appointment. Just consider this and see how it affects. Now, many people come late. We have very busy lives. It is normal in a high, rushed society that most societies have become, driven by economics and what have you. Everybody is unnaturally busy. It's okay, pursue your ambitions and do everything that you need to do, but from now on, try to guard your peace of mind, and what really goes a long way in doing that is taking a little more time. You will see that it has a profound impact on how you feel. And how you feel, especially if you, for example, you have to go to an interview for a job, or you have an important meeting about something, how you feel matters because it affects the people that you are with. And if your vibration is more positive, the people tend to be more positive towards your requirements. So it's more likely that you get the job, or it's more likely that people will accommodate your needs that you came to discuss. And the opposite is also true. If you're not in a good vibration, in a good condition, then people are more inclined to act and react in negative ways, and less inclined to accommodate your needs, give you the job, or accommodate the things that you came to discuss. So it's all in our hands, in the end. Not easy, but that's what yoga is about. It starts with consciousness, then we have to roll up our sleeves and go to work. But we go to work in a playful way. The world is our playground where we can every day we can test ourselves and put to the test the things that we learn and be amazed basically by the enormous difference that it makes. The last part on page 3 Violence can be recognized through pain, which can be very subtle. That is the crucial sentence. Everything that is not harmonious in yoga is considered to be pain. But when we think about pain, we think about when we bump our head into the doorpost, or we cut our fingers when we are cooking, or we burn ourselves to a pan, or we also consider, of course, mental pain when we have a conflict with our partner or a colleague or anybody else. But we often do not consider mental pain seriously as a pain. We just think it's part of life and we have to deal with it, and the harder I deal with it, the better I am. That is, of course, not true. It leads to more disharmony, more conflict. But pain appears in very subtle forms. If you look at disease, for example, disease always starts with very, very subtle indications that something is not right. And you can live with these symptoms for years. We do not recognize it because there is no big pain or anything very uncomfortable. We just go on with life, being distracted with all the busyness, ambitions and desires. But then, because we have ignored the subtle symptoms, it starts to manifest to a little more gross level, little less. And we continue to ignore it. It's maybe just a little inconvenience, but nothing serious, until symptoms start to occur. First you get sick, feel unwell, get tired, loss of energy, loss of mood. But then start physically things start failing, like in your organs or in your bones or your skin or in your brain. Something starts failing, breaking, in fact, breaking down. The physical symptoms are, in fact, the result of many, many subtle alarms, many subtle indications that something is off, that we fail to see. We simply cannot recognize it. And the end stage, of course, is that you die. So we need to learn through our practice of yoga to recognize subtle symptoms of discomfort. Disease 5 years ago started with a very subtle symptom which we didn't recognize, but it eventually could lead to death. Cancer is such a disease that becomes terminal in the end. And we all know that the sooner we recognize, the more chance we have to survive. It's a little bit an extreme example, but pay attention to what you feel. And it starts with asana. You feel too much strain, you feel burning muscle, you know that there's no harmony anymore, that you're overshooting the goal. Stop doing your exercise. You feel any discomfort? Don't be shy to visit a doctor. Many people postpone going to a doctor just because they find it bothersome or annoying, or even the thought of being sick they try to push away, often until it is too late. My father was a smoker, and he would sometimes take a puff and then blow through his handkerchief to show the brown spot from the nicotine, kind of proudly. And you know, that was a long time ago when everybody smoked. We know a lot more about smoking now. But he had a bad cough, and he would joke that the doctor told him to light another one every time that he coughed. And he died, of course, of lung cancer in his early 50s. Many years of ignoring the symptoms, even joking about it, just led to a premature death. It is a very extreme example, but a visit to the doctor could have solved a lot of problems and avoided premature death. When you are with people, this is more on a subtle level also, pay attention also to what you feel. Because there are people that make the hair in your neck stand up, and we ignore that because of whatever motives that we have, but it tells us something. And if we only pay attention, it can often avoid lots of problems, because like with disease, conflict with people often starts with these little indications, these little disharmonies that we often just fail to recognize. And if it ends up in a full-blown conflict in the end, if you look back, you will see that actually there were many red flags already that went unnoticed or conveniently ignored sometimes for certain reasons. For the purpose of making our lives better, more harmonious, more sattvic, we need to start paying attention to these subtle signals. And the earlier, the better. And you will become better and better at it. Questions? Okay. Let's have a short break. Then we will continue with asana.